Hello and welcome to Check It Out at EVPL.
A podcast from your local library.
I'm your host, Aaron.
And I'm your host, Ellen. And today we will be interviewing a few other employees about their favorite books. We'll get to them in just a little bit, but first, Aaron, how are you doing today?
Last month was spooky season, and I'm going to be riding the coattails of that for a while, but also pretty excited about the Thanksgiving coming up as well. Really looking forward to getting together with my family and just creating some new memories and enjoying some good food.
Definitely a lot of fun stuff coming up in the fall. I love that the weather's getting cooler, that it's time to get out the sweaters and like the nice warm drinks. It's very exciting to me.
I am so pumped for like some hot apple cider just sitting outside on the porch. Listen to the crinkling of the leaves. Nothing beats it.
Well, do you want to get to our first interview?
Yeah, sounds great. Hello, everyone. We have Jamye from Macaulay here. Jamye, how's it going?
I'm doing well. I'm loving this fall weather. It's my favorite time of year.
Oh, yeah. I put on a hoodie for the first time this weekend. I cried tears of joy.
I mean, my husband looks forward every year to when he can put his nice cozy bathrobe back on in the evening.
So since obviously we both are big fans of fall, and I personally do have a lot of solid memories about the season, but to kind of tie into the library, you know, one of the things that I think has the strongest connection to memories is what we read. So what to you is the strongest memory you have per something you've read before?
Well, I've always been a reader. As soon as I was able to read, that's what I was doing. And so I do have a lot of good, strong memories with my reading. But my favorite is this happened, maybe 15 years ago. My children were 9 and 13 and 15. And we were actually living in China at the time. And so it was, I'm trying to remember the time of year it was. I want to say around November. And we had traveled up from where we normally lived to this really, really remote village. And it was cold. These were houses that didn't have things like central heat and things like that. We're just wood-built houses, and they were really cool. And down in the kitchen, you'd have like this little open fire that you would sit around when you were not off doing whatever. And it was really, really cold. And so I would always read aloud with my kids. And we were currently going through the series, The Little House on the Prairie books. And we happened to be reading the book, The Long Winter. And it was cold, and we were cold, and the smoke from sitting close to the fire was starting to give us headaches, and the electricity kept going out. So we went up to the bedroom, and we just huddled under blankets. And we're reading by candlelight because, again, the electricity kept going out, and we read The Long Winter together. And that is just, I think, one of my favorite memories, just that we felt like we were inside the story because of how very cold it was as we were reading that story. But it was also such a cozy connection with just us all huddled together reading by candlelight. So that's my favorite story and memory of reading.
Oh, that's awesome. This is a terrible analogy to make, but it reminds me of the 4D rides at like some of those theater parks where you go through the rapids and they like splash water in your face.
Yeah.
But this sounds a lot better than that.
I mean, it was so much fun. It's I don't know if my children remember it as strongly as I do, but it's definitely a favorite family memory for me.
And how long did you guys live in China?
We were there for 8 years.
Oh, okay.
It was a memorable experience.
So, Jamye, what are you currently reading then?
Currently, I'm reading one book for a book club that I'm hosting at 𝗕𝗀𝗪, The 13th Tale by Diana Sutterfield. I haven't actually gotten very far into it, but it's laying the nice groundwork for a very gothic-y, mysterious tale. So it's perfect seasonal type of reading right now. And I'm also reading The Sisters of the Winter Wood by Rena Rossner. I have recently fallen in love with these young adult and adult tales they're like fairy tales, but they're more than the Three Bears. You know, they're more than Red Riding Hood. They might even take elements from those stories, but it's just much more involved and nuanced. And so the sisters in this tale came from parents that one was actually someone who turned into a swan and the other into a bear. and now that they're coming of age, this was not something they knew before about themselves, and now that they're coming of age, one is starting to find these shape-shifting abilities of a bear and the other of a swan, and they're navigating all this within this Russian community that they live in far away. So it's really quite fascinating. I get really pulled in by those kind of tales.
That sounds really interesting. So if someone wants to get involved with the book club, how could one do so?
Reach out to myself or anyone at McCullough Library. We meet the second Wednesday of every month. So the next time we're meeting up will be November 10th, and we'll be starting a new book at that time and discussing the one that we've just finished, which is, of course, the 13th tale.
And have you guys picked the new book yet, or?
I'm kind of letting the group evolve a little bit to see what their tastes lie. The first two I picked myself based on, what I wanted to read. I want to get a consensus of the group and let the group kind of dictate what our theme will be a little bit. So once we have a respectable amount of people, I'm going to do a little mini survey and say, hey, what is our reading track going to be? So we have not yet picked out a December title, but I may be picking one soon, depending on when or if that conversation takes place.
Okay, gotcha. All right, well, thank you very much, Jamye.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Audra here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Ellen. How are you?
I am pretty dang good. So we're here today to talk about some books. Now, is there a book series that you loved so much you've read it multiple times?
There are actually several things. I can be a little bit obsessive in rereading or even rewatching things. So there's two categories, really. I like to go back and redo things like classics or things I've had to read for school at different times. Because as you get older, I think that you get different things out of it. Books that I remember really liking, I no longer do. Sorry, The Giver. And books that I could barely make it through for projects, I can appreciate more now. And I also read a lot of pop fiction, kind of obsessively as newer things have come out. So like Shamefully, we got Midnight Sun, and I had to reread all of Twilight in one weekend.
I don't think that's shameful.
Yeah, same for the Hunger Games, anytime I remember that Harry Potter exists, I get in that mood. So a lot of those popular things.
Do you think there's a string connecting those series that make you want to reread them?
I think it's more impulsive as I see newer things, or if I come across a classic, or someone mentions it. Yeah, I think that it's mostly when it's at the top of mind. Or some of them might be seasonal too. Harry Potter is when I get that week off of vacation or that kind of stuff. So
yeah, you definitely need a full week to make it through all the Harry Potters.
Yeah. What about you? Is there anything you keep going back to?
There are a few that I keep going back to. I definitely think of them as comfort books, kind of like comfort food.
Yeah.
Pride and Prejudice is one. I've always just thought it's very sweet. Another is the Graceling series by Kristen Cashore. There's now 4 books in that, and every time I see her mentioned, I have to go and start rereading one of them.
Yeah, that's its own problem, too. As I said, as series that are still being written and in production, I am the worst about going back to the beginning. I'm dreading the next book of Outlander, because that's going to be about a month of going back to square one. So
they're big books too, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. They're some Game of Thrones size, thousands and thousands of pages. But they're definitely worth the read, especially if you're fans of the show.
Mm-hmm. Were you a book fan first or a show fan first?
I am diligently a book fan first. And I sometimes even get mad at myself if I've watched something and then realize it's a book, because you've spoiled the book from then on. And I love being able to compare when you read the book first. So
I definitely get that. I feel like when I was in school, I had to read the book first. And now that I'm a little older, it's like, whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, I definitely, if I can, like the chance to make my own mental images,
Yeah. Are there any books that you read seasonally besides like Harry Potter in kind of the fall months? Is there like a winter pick or like a summer read that you go back to every year?
I don't think that there's something that I go back to, but I definitely do read seasonally. I'm in a couple book clubs, so that kind of goes along with it, that they tend to trend towards the season. So right now I'm doing a juvenile kind of horror book. It's Night Books by J.A. White, which actually just came out on Netflix. So
Yes.
again, book first. And then I'll get to that, hopefully before Halloween. But I try to read a lot from our juvenile collection because I work in the kids department. And other than that, I'm in school right now. So it's just lots of academic articles.
Oh, yes, I am the same way right now. So if you don't have like a seasonal go-to for every season, do you have a trope that you have to read every season?
I definitely read a horror. For every October, I do occasionally do a guilty beach read romance. I'm not quite big on romance, but if I
Again,
get a
no
summer
shame.
vacation, yeah. I think it just kind of depends because I typically have more free time in the fall or the winter, so I can
Mhm.
get into some of those deeper things or like the mystery books, the psychological thrillers, rather than just the really quick reads.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, summer also, like, when it's so nice out, you don't want to spend all your time getting really deep into, like, heavy literature, so definitely I get the beach read, summer romance kind of thing.
Yeah.
You said you're reading something for a book discussion right now, Night Books?
Yeah, so that's actually our central library staff just started a genre study book discussion just for the staff, unfortunately. But we're hoping that it'll help us better serve the public when they're asking for those recommendations.
Oh,
So
that's pretty cool.
we're going to do a different genre each month, and we'll have lots of recommendations coming to you.
Yeah, so we can all look forward to finding those enhanced recommendations, is what you're saying.
Yep, definitely. And most of the central staff is a part of that, so you can come and see us.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Yeah, thanks, Ellen, for having me.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Hey there, we have Alex from Read in the Central Library with us today. How's it going, Alex?
It's going pretty good. How about you?
Oh, it's going great.
All
like
right.
I said before, fall weather's finally starting to hit, and I could
Yes.
not be happier.
Oh, me too. Especially the way I dress most times. I probably should kind of downplay to a t-shirt and maybe something shorter, but I like to look professional and I like to, get the tie going and whatnot. I'm working on seasonal ties and stuff. So now that it's getting cooler, I'm hoping to advance to like sweater stage, and like Mr. Rogers style and whatnot. So at least that's the goal.
Sounds like a
this year.
Pokemon
Yeah.
episode.
He's leveling up. So yeah.
So seasonal ties, you have like pumpkins, you have...
I'm hoping that the last full week of October, I got a tie with pumpkins on it, and I got another tie with like cobwebs and spiders and stuff. Those are the only two really. I have an orange tie, but I feel like the dress shirts that I have just don't match with it well. I mean, this probably could. This white shirt that I'm wearing, by the way, to give everybody a visualization as to what I'm wearing. But honestly, yeah, beyond that, Christmas, though, is going to be like, there's going to be like a new tie every other day. So I got so many Christmas ties, and I'm a tie guy. I don't know what it is about ties, but yeah, it's just become a thing. Especially now that I'm working this job. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, it's probably too soon to talk about this, but real quickly, you got any ugly sweaters to rock in Christmas time?
Oh, man. I do. I have like a sweater vest where it's, it's got like Rudolph and Christmas tree. It's not really like, you know what I mean? It doesn't have like a whole bunch of stuff going on with it, but it is technically an ugly sweater vest. And then I have another sweater that I can't really wear to work, but it's it's got like 𝗕𝗀𝗀𝗪, on it and whatnot. So, although it is one of those like contemplations where I'm like, could I get away with it? No, I not in the Read Center at least. No, because I don't want some kid looking at me going, what does that mean? And that would be bad. But yeah, those are the only two. I need to work on my ugly sweater game big time. Yeah, the ties I've got, the sweaters no. So
I will say on the ties, I don't have anything like really spiffy or like special. I have a Space Jam tie from when I was from 4th grade.
Oh, that's great.
We'll never get rid of that.
Yeah.
Ever. So I guess
so nostalgic. Yeah.
So
yeah.
I guess we should probably talk about the thing we came here to talk about
Right.
today.
Yeah. Exactly. Chapter 4. Oh, no pun intended. Okay. But yeah.
So Alex, of course, working at the library, it's usually assumed that you are a lover of books. So I was just curious, what's your top 3 favorite books?
My top 3.
If you can like actually limit it to 3.
Oh yeah, that's true. Well, actually, really 3 is enough, honestly, as far as like all-time favorites. But I will start with number 1. It's called Shadow of the Wind, and it's by a Spanish author named, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this right, Carlos Ruiz Zafón, I think is how you pronounce it. I'm terrible with it, but I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it. But anyway, it's called The Shadow of the Wind. It's set back after, it's like post Spanish Civil War time. And it's set in Barcelona, Spain, during that time. So we're talking like sometime after 1945, after the Great World War II. And this main character, Daniel, his father takes him to this place called the Cemetery of Forgotten Books. And it's about all these books that have hence been forgotten. And he sees this one book sticking out at the end of this bookshelf. And it's called The Shadow of the Wind by this guy named 𝗕𝗓𝗪𝗂𝗪, I think is how you pronounce it. And he's just so fascinated by Juliet's history of, him writing these other books and how he became this mysterious figure who just disappeared one day. And then there's somebody out there burning his books and they're trying to find out who it is. And it's definitely a big mystery book, but the way that it's written is so well done. It's so beautifully written. As far as like there's this one homeless character that Daniel befriends, and I think you pronounce his name Ferenz, I think is what it's pronounced. But anyway, he talks about like fascination with women, and he's very how do I put this, pretty perverted type character. Like he's very perverted, but he's also very comical. But the way that the author writes him is brilliant. Anyway, that's Shadow of the Wind. I highly recommend it. I know we have it at pretty much all the branches because I looked it up. I wanted to make sure so I can make it a recommendation.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. My second book, as far as like number 2, is The Great Gatsby. Timeless. I love it. I've always loved it ever since we had to read it in high school. It was part of the curriculum, and I was like, I don't know if I'm really interested in it. And then we sat there and we listened to Tim Robbins, the actor, read it, and he actually did a pretty good job, like differentiating the characters and all. I love that book. I just love the mystery of Gatsby and the buildup of revealing his story, and similar like Shadow of the Wind and about the author 𝗕𝗓𝗪𝗂𝗪𝗧. My third book, last but not least, is Animal Farm. Yeah, George. It's one of those books, George Orwell, but it's one of those books where it's just like about it's so political. It breaks it down, but it breaks it down in a very simplistic way about animals on a farm, and the pigs are the police and whatnot. And it's I don't know what it is about that book, but I could reread it many times over and over again. I just love it. So. Yeah.
That was one of my personal favorites back in high school, too.
Oh, okay, yeah. And again, another high school read, and I just got captivated by it.
Actually, I was a nerd. I sought that out on my own.
Oh, okay,
I remember TNT had like a TV movie.
Oh, yeah,
of that.
yeah.
I was just like, oh, well, I better read the movie before I read the movie.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
No, but yeah.
Read the book before I watch the movie.
Oh, yeah. And also I'm a big Pink Floyd fan, and they came out with that album Animals, that's basically Animal Farm, but in an album, a Pink Floyd album.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's almost like if Pink Floyd just said, hey, we're going to kind of go with like the Grateful Dead routine and just do all these really like, 15-minute long songs and stuff, and just kind of, yeah. But it's really good. But I remember my dad would play that album because he's a big Pink Floyd fan, and then that connected me to Animal Farm a little bit more, when I knew about it. I went, ooh, that's fascinating.
I love a good concept album.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And yeah, that's another recommendation. Pink Floyd Animals, if you want to listen to it. It's pretty good.
All right, awesome. Thank you. So what are you reading currently?
Right now, I am reading what's called The Fifth Heart. It's about Sherlock Holmes, and he goes on this investigation of the murder of this character named Clover Adams, who is the niece of John Adams. So part of the Adams family, of the time. Yeah. So like John Adams,
okay.
The president.
Yeah.
And he's investigating the death of this Clover Adams character. And it's a mystery. I mean, it's a huge. So far, it's getting there. It's not captivating me as much as I was hoping for, because I'm a big murder mystery type guy. Agatha Christie all the way is really how I am. So this book, it's got its Christie-isms, if you will. It's got moments of like, ooh, that's an interesting clue there. Ooh, that's it keeps you guessing, but it really keeps doing these big flashbacks off and on. So it just kind of goes back and forth a lot, at least for the first 5 chapters, and I'm just kind of like, it might get better. I don't know. So
I'll have to revisit this with you later.
Yeah,
we'll plug in like a random episode where it's like, by the way, Alex liked the book, guys.
Yes.
Just in case you were wondering.
It actually did. Yeah, because right now it's not convincing me, but I feel like with some of the greatest books I've ever read, that's usually how it starts. It goes from I'm not convinced, and then there's usually like a certain pivotal turn, in the book where it's like, all right, okay, that's good, that's clever, and so
yeah, it's like they always say, don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah,
don't judge a book until you've read the whole thing too.
Until you get to a certain point, because you never know. Yeah, so and I feel like that's what's probably going to happen with this book, because I've heard really great reviews about it. The Fifth Heart. And even the book cover it's all blue, and it's got this shadowy character on the front, and it's very haunting looking. And I thought, ooh, that's really interesting. I want to check that out. And I read the the synopsis and everything, and seemed like an interesting book. So that's what I'm reading right now. And like I said, hopefully it does get better. So yeah.
All right, Alex. Well, thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you. All right.
So we're here now with Ryan. Ryan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Ryan. I work at Central in the Outreach Department. We are a department that tries to get EVPL resources out into the community, places in need. We do all sorts of different events. We were in the Fall Festival Parade, and if anyone's ever interested, you can just check the website and have us request to go out to anywhere that might need us.
That sounds pretty cool. I assume even though you may not work directly with books every day, you're still a fan of reading.
I'm a huge fan of reading. I've been doing it for most of my life. And I actually, part of my job as outreach is I work with daycares and preschools.
Oh, that's pretty fun.
Yeah, I have to curate crates of materials for a bunch of 0 to 5-year-old kids. So last month I read about 400 kids books. My brain was pretty much mush.
Do you have a favorite kids book, or are you just so beyond that right now?
I don't want to read it right now, but yeah, I do have a favorite. It's Hop on Pop by Dr. Seuss.
That is a good one.
Yeah, my dad was the one that read to us as kids, and he had all the voices down. We get to bounce up and down and stuff. He'd do all sorts of great stuff, and they always say, my parents, that they had no idea what they were doing. But when I started working here, and they say the Every Child Ready to Read program with the writing, reading, singing, all those skills they try and build, my parents were doing all of it. So they know what's up.
I definitely read a lot of Dr. Seuss growing up. My favorite book was Fox and Socks.
A definite good one.
Yeah, and my dad had it memorized so he could read it perfectly every single time, and it was very impressive to me as a 4-year-old.
Have you discovered the YouTuber that raps Dr. Seuss yet?
I have seen the Walk It in My Pocket. I've not seen anything else. Is it that guy?
I'll send you the link, but he does an amazing Fox and Socks. My wife listened to it. She was impressed. She's not a Dr. Seuss fan, but she was still impressed.
Okay, we definitely need to put that in the show notes too. So, apart from kids' books, do you have a favorite author or genre?
So I'd say throughout my life, I've kind of evolved with my reading. As a kid, genre, just the silly stuff, Dr. Seuss and all that. And then as I got a little older, still fantasy, I think, was my big go-to. I think the first serious book that I read was Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. I read that when I was 14 or 15. I wasn't quite ready for it, but I mean, my vocabulary afterwards was amazing, so that's good. And I've read it a couple more times. So I really like that one, but as I've gotten older now, I'm 32, and I really like fantasy fiction. So that's kind of my go-to staple. I've got a group of friends that we all read pretty much the same thing, and we'll do a little book discussion. So it's really fun. My current obsession in that genre is the Name of the Wind series.
Okay,
But-
yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, Patrick Rothfuss. It's probably my favorite fantasy fiction and probably the best one to be written in about the past 10 years. Actually, it's probably longer than that now. The unfortunate part is it's a trilogy, and he's working on the last book for the past 12 years.
Does that beat the record for George R.R. Martin?
I think it does,
Okay.
actually. But it'll come eventually. I believe, I hope one day I will finish the trilogy.
I hope so too. So you're kind of more of a fan of that high fantasy, like the really complex worlds?
Very much so. I'm a huge fan of world building.
Mhm.
I started pretty early. My brother is 7 years older than me.
Mm-hmm.
I got his hand-me-down books, and of course he had the entire Lord of the Rings series, some Dragonlance stuff, like D&D based fantasy fiction. So I just perused it. Of course, he was 18, I was 11. I wasn't quite up for the challenge, but eventually I got through. I think the Fellowship of the Ring took me about a year to get through.
Yeah, those tend to be a little draining.
I went back to it, and I'm like, did he seriously have like 5 pages devoted to a single song?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, he did. But it was amazing.
Okay, if you've read Lord of the Rings and you're into high fantasy, have you read the *Silmarillion*?
I attempted to. I read a synopsis is the best I could do. So I know all the cool stuff that happens, but I didn't actually read the material, I have to admit.
I've only ever met one person who has read all the way through the *Silmarillion*, and it was a classmate of mine, and we were having a discussion about it, and he left the room and came back 5 minutes later to correct a point that he had made. So I feel like once you read the *Silmarillion*, you become maybe a little bit insufferable.
I don't know if it's a requirement, but I mean, if you did that much work to get through that book, you probably want to share as much as you can.
Yeah, that's fair. Did you have a book that made you really fall in love with that kind of genre, or was it just little things?
I don't think it was a book in particular that got me into it. I think it was seeing my family, who pretty much all have the same reading taste as me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, my brother was 7 years older. He liked fantasy fiction. My dad is actually a huge fan as well. So I think almost via osmosis, I developed their enjoyment of the genre. It's pretty hard to get into pretty early because it's complicated. There's a lot of world building involved, and you have to have a really good imagination. So, you know, it took a while, but by 14, 15, I was primed to go.
Okay, yeah. Do you read any fantasy that's like lighter on world building, like the kind of pop fiction fluffy stuff where maybe not everything lines up?
My wife is a huge fan of Twilight, so I have had to read that, and I enjoyed it. It's lighter. So that was a nice break from the. I also read a lot of Brandon Sanderson, and those books are 1,200 pages of world building. So my wife tried it, and she's like, no thanks, can't do it.
Yeah, there is kind of a point when they get that long that it becomes a little bit too much for a lot of people.
Yeah, what was the famous Tolkien phrase, "The distant mountains"? Have you heard that or that quote?
I don't remember.
About his writing, how you should always write about the distant mountains that they're interesting enough, but you never reach them. So as reading fantasy fiction, once everything's been explained, you can lose interest. So you always got to keep it kind of far away.
Yeah. Okay, is there anything else you're currently reading right now?
Currently reading, I don't know if my brain can handle it because of all the children's books that my job is requiring me to read, but I mean, I've got, I've done The Little Blue Truck, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, the classics. So that's on my list, is to just read the classic children's book, but that's mainly for the kids that I work with.
Okay. Do the kids you work with have any favorites?
They're pretty young. They can't really read or write. So, I mean, as long as I'm acting goofy and silly and having fun, they love it.
Yeah, they'll listen to whatever you read them.
I could probably get some of Tolkien's work in there, and as long as I'm acting crazy, they love it.
Yeah. Well, is there anything you want to promote from the outreach team?
Well, typically November and December a little slower with the outreach events, with it getting cold outside. So we don't have a ton of events planned currently, but we've got big plans for 2022. So just keep an eye out on the website. We should be announcing everything that's coming in the next couple of months.
Okay, that sounds really exciting. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me, Ellen. And this was so much fun. What if I were to get interested in podcasting, but I didn't have the equipment? Is there somewhere, possibly a building or organization in Evansville, that I could use such equipment?
Well, actually, we are recording right here in EVPL's very own makerspace. All of this equipment will be available to patrons starting soon.
Wow, that's amazing. I'll have to check it out.
Hey everyone! Right now we have Stacy, the Read Center supervisor, here with us. How's it going, Stacy?
Oh, things are going great.
So, Stacy, from what I understand, you yourself were a very reluctant reader. What got you into the reading game?
Well, that's a very good question. I actually have a learning disability, and so not only was I a reluctant reader, but learning for me to read was very, very hard. So my dad always had books in the house. He wanted to be an English teacher, so we always had reading material around, and my brother was an avid reader. I hung out with the comic books. I could, love to look at the pictures and, could tell the story from there, or memorized some of the storylines. But I really was a struggling reader, and I, usually when I tell this story, I say I couldn't read up until about 6th grade. Well, that's not true. I mean, I could read, but I was not a very fluid or very good reader. And it was about that time my best friend in elementary school was moving to Texas. And as she was moving, she was trying to get rid of stuff, and she gave me an annotated copy of Treasure Island. And it's like, okay, I would not ever give a reluctant reader that hard of a book to start off with. But it was annotated, which means, the little margins had, like if they talked about a doubloon, then there's a picture of doubloon and the definition of the doubloon in the margins. And I took all summer and I struggled, but it took me 3 months and I got through that book. And having finished that, it's like, I'm a reader now. And the following summer, it took me 3 months to get through the very first Tarzan the Ape Man book by Audra Sparrows. And so between those two books, and I usually have to think to remember which one came first, those two books made me a reader.
So, if you flip the script now, what books would you recommend to help encourage a reluctant reader?
I've worked with a lot of reluctant readers in my time, and to me it's the right book for the right person at the right time. You've probably, in library land, we use that expression a lot. Everybody's got a book that's their hook book, and it's like, what was the book that really got you into reading? And it's different for everybody. So when I come across a reluctant reader, and I get a lot of them down in the Children's Center, we kind of do a variation of the reader's advisory interview. What kind of video games do you play? What kind of television shows do you watch? Are you into sports? And you kind of get a feel for where their interests are. A kid that's into sports might like a book about sports. They might like a nonfiction book about sports. Sometimes a reluctant reader, it's just the type of books that they're being offered. I know in school it's often for free time, it's fiction, and a lot of times, especially boys, would rather read the nonfiction for their free time. So it's giving them the freedom to explore and experiment with different types of books. And then I always do fall back on my background was the comic book, so thank God we have graphic novels and a good solid graphic novel collection. So you can usually hook kids in that way with the pictures.
So I'm going to give you a hypothetical on this.
Sure.
I come in and my family has banned reading. Turns out there's a very ugly history there. Led to lots of financial hardships. So now my family has banned reading. So I come up to you, I'm like, I'm really into video games. Specifically, I like the ones where you skateboard. So video games and skateboarding, what would you recommend?
Okay, I do know that Matt Christopher he does a lot of different sport books. He's kind of old school but at this point. But he has some that are with a skateboarding theme to it. That's off the top of my head. I would actually go to the catalog and see if I can find anything more current than that. But I know, like, even a Tony Hawk's biography, he's still, in the world enough that kids know who I'm talking about. So I'm not that old. Oh, but I would find, I know we've got books on video games. There's the how-tos, how to do them better, how to, especially if it's Roblox or Minecraft. But I also have, like in Minecraft, I also have fiction novelizations of, the Diary of a Creeper kind of thing. And so I can take that one a couple different ways. But your question was kind of two-parters. Not only what would I recommend to this, video game skateboarding loving, reluctant reader, but I wouldn't even categorize him a reluctant reader if you said the family band reading. That's a different issue. You got to get books in their hands, but they also have to have the time and the space and the freedom to read. So, kind of set them up in a little, alcove with a nice cushy chair and say, hey, as long as you're here, here's the books you want to read, and here's where they're going to be sitting. And anytime you come to the library, come and grab this book. And, we can be subversive if we need to.
Thank you for taking my little joke scenario and actually giving a sincere remedy to it, because you're good at your job, Stacy. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
Kind of transitioning back into something a little more personal, what is your current favorite author or genre?
Well, I have been obsessed with Neil Gaiman for about a decade and a half now. Unfortunately, he's been really popular. Other people are starting to, find out that he exists. So I'm not this, lone, fan girl going, wee, and they're like, who are you talking about? Now people actually know who I'm referring to. I first ran across Neil Gaiman in it was a library up in Minnesota. My boss was trying to develop a YA collection, and she bought the Sandman graphic novels for the YA collection. And I read them. I'm like, that's more of an adult collection, but that's where I first read them. And it was about that time when he published Coraline, he did a book club on MPR, not NPR, but M for Minnesota Public Radio. And I talked my boss into going down there to see him live, and she was so creeped out by that book. I don't know if you're familiar with Coraline. It's been made into a stop-motion animation movie.
Yeah, I've seen
there's
it.
a thing where they're in this other world, and people have buttons for eyes, and it kind of creeps people out. And Neil himself said there are two people that read that book. They're, the children read it, and they're reading a book about a girl having an adventures, and they have faith in the author that she's coming out of this, okay. When an adult reads that book, they are reading about a child in danger. And so parents tend to get a lot more creeped out by some of those books than the kids do.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. And so, like I say, seeing him live about there, I've been obsessed with, his writing and his work ever since. And he's so prolific in so many different directions, too.
All right, Stacy. Well, thanks for joining us today. I do have one more question for you. What are you currently reading?
So recently we went on a road trip, and we like to do audiobooks, my husband and I, when we travel, and I got him listening to the Dresden Files. And so our last car trip, I think we were up to book 10. There's 17 books in that, and that's urban fantasy about a wizard who happens to be named Harry, no relation to Potter, and he's a wizard for hire in Chicago, so it's a good urban fantasy.
I think that's where the similarities definitely end. Yeah,
wizard named Harry, that's it. And they're very different books, but very, very good. He's been writing them for years now. And I've read through them, and it's fun to go back and actually listen to them on audio.
Cool. My first exposure to Harry Dresden was when they made the sci-fi show, the Dresden Files. Yeah.
Cringing.
She made the face like she just ate something very sour, and that's very understandable because it wasn't that great of a show, and it actually prevented me from reading the source material for a long time.
Okay.
But I did start up a few years ago. I'm on book 4 right now.
Okay.
It's wonderful. It's amazing. I definitely missed out on it.
Yeah. Oh, and I think a few of the books are actually in graphic novel form, and there's a cooperative board game that was like a really good Kickstarter.
Oh, okay.
And you get to be the different characters from the book, and so, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Stacy. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us and our various guests this week.
If you would like to share your own favorite memories of books, you can email us at podcasts@evpl.org. So thanks for joining us this week, and we'll see you next time
At Check It Out with EVPL.